Hello. It's good to see all of you after 2 years.
2 years, 2 months. Some of them look different in person.
So if the photographs are done, then we can probably start. I think let's just let them take the photographs and then we can start. Okay, done? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Hello and welcome to this post-policy conference. It's good to see all of you here in RBI premises after a long gap of 2 years. And I hope everybody has been keeping safe and healthy. So without much ado, I'll introduce, we have today 20 media participants in the press conference. And with your permission, I'll begin the press conference. I'll call out the names of the persons. They will ask the question and then we will respond from our side. If you'd like to say some initial remarks, then yeah, please.
I think इसको हटा देते हैं. Good morning. We are actually delighted to have all of you here after a gap of 2 years. We are having the first, face-to-face press interaction. So we are very happy that all of you have been safe. And so I would like to mention that that gives us a lot of satisfaction. And hopefully we will be able to continue this practice, which we are restoring back to the normal pattern that we followed earlier. Now, the statement today which I made, there are a few things which I thought I would just explain in the beginning for the sake of clarity and also to put things in the proper perspective. There are 7 things from the monetary policy point of view. There are 7 things which we have done, and which I think it is all there in the statement at various places, but I'm just putting them together. The first is that we have revised our inflation and growth projections. And if you look at the inflation projections in particular, which I think which would attract a lot of attention. If you look at the inflation projections, primarily the projections have been revised upwards due to war-induced factors. The primary reasons are the crude oil having gone up to 100, it went to 130 as I had mentioned, then they have moderated, but we have assumed a price of $100 per barrel. So that is the most important reason. And among the other major reasons, the price of edible oil, which is again, edible oil prices have steepened. Again, that's due to war-related factors. I've spelled out the details in the statement. I don't want to again go into that. Edible oil, prices of wheat also have gone up because that is related to war. And the feed cost, which feeds into the prices of poultry, egg, and dairy products. So these are the major factors for, which account for the upward revision of the inflation. So inflation and growth projections have been revised. That's the first point. The second point is that in the sequence of priorities, we have now put inflation before growth. So that is the sequence of our priorities. First is inflation, followed by growth. For last 3 years, starting February 2019, if you remember, we had put growth ahead of inflation in the sequence. This time we have revised that because we thought that the time is appropriate and that is something which needs to be done. That was the second point. The third point is that the stance continues to be accommodative while focusing on withdrawal of accommodation. So we are gradually, therefore, moving away from the accommodation, which has been again, which has been there for more than 2 years. In fact, somewhere in the middle of 2019, we had switched over from neutral to accommodation. The fourth point is that the LAF corridor has been normalized. The corridor is now 50 basis points, 25 basis points on either side of the policy repo rate, which is at 4%. The fifth point is that SDF has been instituted, has been introduced, and SDF will now be the bottom of the corridor. The sixth point is that we have said with regard to liquidity, the liquidity withdrawal will be done in a multi-year time frame. We have mentioned multi-year time frame after very carefully weighing what would be the economic cost of withdrawal of liquidity, and what would be necessary keeping in mind the stance of monetary policy. So the liquidity policy, the liquidity withdrawal will be taking these two factors into account. We have said it will be done on a multi-year time frame, and a multi-year is obviously more than 1 year. So it can be 2 years, it can be 3 years. That will depend on the evolving situation. If there are questions, we would like to elaborate upon it later on. And the seventh point is that I have said in the statement that the situation is dynamic and fast changing, and all our actions will be tailored accordingly. Situation is really fast changing. Between February and now, you saw what kind of developments, what kind of tectonic shifts, that is the word I have used in my statement, what kind of tectonic shifts have happened all over the globe. So I will stop here. These were some of the initial remarks which I thought to just put into perspective what is there in various parts of my statement. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. To start with, I'll invite Mr. Govardhan Rangan from Economic Times to ask his question.
Good afternoon, Governor. So thanks for bringing us back here after 2 years. It's good to be here. You mentioned that you already started gradually withdrawing the accommodative position. And we could see that in the statement also that you have replaced continuing with remain. So there is a kind of a signaling that the next step could be moving to neutral. Is that what the signal is in terms of after having increased the inflation forecast by almost 120 basis points? And also the SDF, why an SDF now? Is it to allow non-banks also to participate to address the liquidity issue? Thank you.
Non-banks, there is no proposal as of now. There is no such proposal, but I would think that let the press conference be participative. As you can see, I have all the deputy governors of Reserve Bank with me, so I would request Deputy Governor Dr. Michael Patra, to take that question.
So first of all, why withdrawal of accommodation? As you know that we had taken the policy repo rate to an all-time low, which is 4%. If you adjust it for the target, then the real policy rate was 0. Now that was ultra accommodation. Now that the situation is changing and inflation particularly is at risk, we want to withdraw the ultra accommodation. But we still have scope to remain accommodative. On the SDF, why the SDF? We chose to introduce the SDF from a position of strength. To give you an example, now we are absorbing liquidity because of government spend, and government is in ways and means. That is the magnitude of the shift. So as you can see, it was opportune to introduce it now. Going forward, it prepares us for both sides of the situation. One, as you are seeing right now, we are absorbing huge amounts of liquidity. Suppose the situation changes and the war ceases and India becomes a preferred habitat of capital flows, as it was in the year before. This enormously increases the capacity of the RBI to sterilize those flows and keep monetary expansion in check.
Thank you, sirs. I'll move on to Lata Venkatesh from CNBC-18.
Yeah.
Governor, your last statement was that the objective is to restore the size of the liquidity surplus in the system to a level consistent with the prevailing stance of the monetary policy. So does it mean the monetary policy becomes neutral only when liquidity becomes neutral? That's the question. I mean, that occurred to me when you said the seventh point. But my other question was, you are perilously close to crossing 6% 3 quarters in a row. Already April, Jan, Feb, March is above 6. And by your own forecast, this April, May, June is 6. And the next quarter, you all have a forecast of 5.8. It doesn't take much for it to become 6. So then what do you do?
We are watchful. The last point which I mentioned in my opening remarks is that the situation is dynamic and fast changing, and all our actions will be tailored accordingly. And all instruments are on the table. So we are watchful of the emerging trends, how the war progresses, how the commodity prices and the crude oil prices, how they behave in the coming months. And accordingly, whatever action is warranted, we will take them, and all our actions will be tailored accordingly.
All your action, will you even ask for a change in the monetary framework excused for one?
No. When I say, that is a very hypothetical question.
I'm asking you what you mean.
What we have is that you said that we are perilously close to breaching the, the target. That is 3 consecutive quarters if it exceeds 6%. We are watchful, and we will take whatever action is necessary at the appropriate time. And I think the broad thrust of the monetary policy and the statement is sufficiently clear. So the RBI will act, and act as per the emerging situation.
Thank you, sir.
Is there anything you would like to supplement to what I
So on the stance, you said liquidity will be in consonance with the stance. So does stance become neutral only when liquidity becomes neutral?
Does stance become?
Neutral only when liquidity becomes neutral, because now liquidity is surplus.
No, again, liquidity becoming neutral, it's dependent on so many factors. It will depend on credit absorption, credit growth also. It depends, as the Deputy Governor pointed out, on the pace of government spending. It depends on capital flows, inflows and outflows. So therefore, I would not like to sort of, at this point of time, freeze my options. I would like to keep our options open. And considering all these variables, we will take appropriate action.
Thank you, sir. I'll move on to Ms. Ira Duggal from Bloomberg Queen.
Good afternoon, sirs. My question is on the liquidity framework, if you can just give us a little bit more clarity. There are now 4 rates. Firstly, what is the utility of the fixed rate reverse repo? Why have we kept that there? I think even the Mohanty committee had, correct me if I'm wrong, had recommended a 3-rate framework. So now that the STF has been activated, keeping a reverse repo at 335, STF at 375, does it not lend itself to more volatility, particularly in the short-term markets, sir?
I think you can take that question.
Yeah, the fixed rate reverse repo is there because, as the RBI stated policy, is that there is no instrument which we take off the table. But we have specified that it will not be for everyday use or for liquidity management. It will be there for purposes which we will decide from time to time. The liquidity management will effectively be with the LAF. And the LAF has 3 rates: the MSF, the SDF, and the repo should be at the center. So we are getting back to that system. In the process, the reverse repo is kept there because it has no use for the liquidity management as of now. But we will, if we find a purpose for it, we will announce it and use it for that purpose.
So effectively, sir, theoretically, in a liquidity surplus scenario, the STF rate is the operative rate, or the VRRRs is where the effective short-term rate is.
That's right.
Thank you, sir. I'll move on to Mr. Mayur Shetty from Times of India.
So on the liquidity framework again, what was the reason for not using the the reverse repo, is it because it goes against the accommodative stance, or is it because it's collateralized?
You see, SDF gives us greater flexibility in implementing the monetary policy objectives. It is uncollateralized, and we are not constrained by the, we are not constrained by the stock of liquidity that we have or we don't have for various liquidity management operations. So it gives that much more flexibility to the Reserve Bank. And if you recall, I had said in my statement also, it is thereby, consequently, it is also an instrument of financial stability. It enables us to sterilize, it would enable us to sterilize liquidity if there is excess build-up due to various reasons without the constraint of collaterals. So it gives us flexibility. It enables us to strengthen financial stability. It's also an instrument of promoting and strengthening financial stability.
It's also a signaling of the stance. Will it get revised when the stance changes?
So which one?
The reverse repo.
No, reverse repo at the moment remains at 335, and as was explained by the Deputy Governor, when we see a need for it and if such a situation warrants, we will at that time probably consider and activate it.
But the stance
But
has changed to, like you all are saying, that you're getting into a withdrawal stance. Would the reverse repo change when you start withdrawing?
that is a hypothetical question. I would not like to. Let me make one thing clear. Repo rate, which is decided by the MPC will decide the repo rate from time to time in the MPC meetings. Now that the corridor is normalized, once and if the MPC decides to increase the repo rates, then both the other rates, MSF and SDM, will move in tandem. So, rate action, that is policy repo rate action by the MPC, will now be accompanied by concomitant revision of the SDF and MSF rates. So that is the sum and substance of what we are saying.
Thank you, sir. I'll move on to Mr. Anup Roy from Bloomberg.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Governor. Sir, there were some criticism that RBI was behind the curve, etc. Now, with this kind of hawkish policy, and and actually nobody, not many expected that you will bring down growth estimate to 7.2%, maybe maximum 7.5%. Why this? How do you explain this aggressive stance from the RBI's perspective?
Now, hawkish or dovish or whatever is a media formulation, I will not like to enter into that. And this whole debate about behind the curve, I think it again depends on who is drawing the curve and how he is drawing the curve. But on a more serious note, I don't think the RBI is behind the curve at all. I have said it on a number of occasions. In fact, in a recent event also, I have said that. Very often, India's monetary policy action is compared with what the advanced economies are doing. Please remember that advanced economies are still on a reduction of their what you call the the bond sale program. The bond purchase program. I'm sorry. They are reducing it. They are phasing it out. We stopped GSAP last year in October. We have not done GSAP after that. If you see our actions with regard to outright OMO, not Operation Twist, but outright OMO, they have been far less, and not despite that also the yield curves have sort of moved in a particular manner. So therefore, that is with regard to the liquidity. Now, with regard to the rates, we have been very watchful. And the February policy, we had given a certain roadmap for inflation. All the factors and all the risks we had calculated at that time factored in, and we had given a particular roadmap. War was something which was a development that started on 24th February, and whole of March it is still continuing. And concomitantly, all that has happened all around the world has introduced a completely new element into the scheme of things. So therefore, we have revised the inflation projections. And I have said that we are ready to take whatever action is required. I have said, in fact, if you read the statement carefully, in my statement, I have said that it's towards the end. I have said that inflation, growth, and financial stability. It's in the last, I think it's in the concluding part. I have said inflation, growth, and continuity. There is a, these are all interlinked, interdependent, and the RBI will deal with them. But please see the sequencing. Go ahead, please add.
Anup, I just wanted to sound a note of caution that when you use the term behind the curve, maybe you should look at the origins of where it came from. And I found that it is actually the name of a documentary film on people in the United States who still think that the world is flat.
Thank you, sirs. I'll now move on to Mr. Manojit Saha from Business Standard.
Thank you, Governor. Do you expect banks to respond by pricing their risk appropriately now that you are no longer ultra accommodative and just only accommodative? And what is the real rate of interest you see for the economy going ahead? Because at now the negative real rate is about 100 basis points, taking 1 year ahead inflation forecast.
You see, the banks will do their risk pricing. Whether they will do it, how much they will do it, I can't say really. I mean, it's for the banks to decide. In fact, it will not be correct for me to sort of in a public forum say how the banks, whether the banks will do and how they will do their risk pricing. It's purely a judgment, a call on the part of the banks, and they will take it. And what's the second question you said?
What is, in your view, what is the real interest rate you see? Right now it is negative, right now it's negative 100 if you take 1 year ahead inflation forecast. Real rate of interest.
I think real rate of interest, neutral rate, all these concepts, there is continuing research. A lot of research has been done and research is continuing. And I would request our in-house expert, the Deputy Governor Michael Patra, if he wishes to, say something on this.
Yeah. So for a developing economy, which has potential to grow, the real rate of interest should be positive. Okay. But that was the state before the pandemic. In the pandemic, that state was abandoned by almost every country in the world, and people all over the world took interest rates down to even negative levels. Around that time, the fix that people got on the real rate was 0 or minus. Now it's, I think, premature to work out a real rate of interest. There is not enough data points. But I think what has been amply explained by Governor is that we have started a process, a focus on withdrawal of accommodation. That is the path back towards a positive real rate. So it's a dynamic situation.
Thank you, sirs. I'll move on to Mr. Bijoy Edicheria from Informist Media.
Hi, sir. Bijoy from Informist here. Sir, one statement conspicuous by its absence is the statement that you have always said that the orderly evolution of the yield curve is a public good at a time when you are moving on at least the LAF corridor and there is such a large government borrowing program on the anvil. Do you think that it is time for the RBI, which was trying to guide rates, to now stop doing that because there are just too many factors globally and domestically playing out that prevents RBI from playing a material role in trying to, prevent a runaway increase in yields?
You see, orderly evolution of the yield curve as a public good. Now, whatever is a public good in a certain situation is a public good forever. I mean, we do not define public goods. Today it's a public good, tomorrow it is not a public good. Orderly evolution of the public good is important. And we will be watchful of the yield curve. We will be watchful of the implementation of the government borrowing program. And I have said also that the RBI will use various instruments from time to time for successful completion of the government borrowing program. One measure which we have announced today relates to the HTM, where we have increased the HTM limit from 22% to 23%. If you recall, it was originally 19.5%. In COVID situation, we increased it to 22%. We have now increased it further to 23%. And we have also said that the securities, government securities to be acquired from now till 31st March 2023, that will also be eligible to be counted under the HTM. So we have taken a first measure. We will remain watchful, and whatever measures are required, we will take them from time to time.
Thank you, sir. I'll request Mr. Shayan Ghosh from the Mint to ask his question.
Hi. So we have seen some KYC issues at some of the entities which are regulated by RBI, where customers found out they have loans without having taken them. So specifically with regard to these entities, has RBI taken any action or is planning? And secondly, generally about these KYC and privacy issues, what is RBI's thinking on how these issues could be mitigated in future?
I would request, I think, Deputy Governor Rajeshwar Rao to take that question.
No, wherever we have seen the cases where this kind of irregularities have happened, we are looking into it, and based on the outcome of an investigation, appropriate action could be initiated. As regards the KYC issues, there are certain operational issues also in the KYC. We are engaging with internally also, we are looking at the KYC issues, and if required, we will look at what kind of amendments are required for the regulations and make it simple, but at the same time effective, and address the concerns around the KYC on an ongoing basis. So we will be looking at that issue.
And KYC, whatever action we take has to be also in consonance with the requirements under the PMLA, which is decided by that is the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So that also stipulates certain requirements. So as the Deputy Governor says, we are monitoring it. We are analyzing the various cases. Individual cases, actions have been taken, but we are just seeing what are the trends, and we'll take whatever necessary measures as appropriate.
Thank you, sirs. I'll move on to Swati Bhatt Shete from Thomson Reuters.
Thank you, Yogesh, sir. I had one very small question. We had referred to the output gap, not having closed, like Dr. Patra had mentioned it a couple of policies ago. I want to know where the situation stands on that. And secondly, so we don't get an opportunity to ask you directly, so just wanted to understand on the HDFC and HDFC Bank merger front, RBI has not been very comfortable with, a bank having significant stakes in insurance companies and AMCs. But HDFC, the NBFC, does own a significant stake. What is the stand on that, and how will that be handled? Thank you.
You see, individual cases, I will not be able to spell out in a press conference what would be our stance. All that I would like to say is that we have received proposal from the HDFC and the HDFC Bank with regard to the merger announcement they have made. The proposal has been received, and that is under examination. And we will, in terms of our various regulatory guidelines and other aspects, we will examine them. And as and when a decision is taken, you will come to know about it. Beyond that, it will not be proper or possible for me to say as to what would be RBI's approach in this case. With regard to the, you said the output gap. Now, there is still a persisting output gap. I mean, the capacity utilization has improved from previous month. I think it was 68.3. I have given it in the statement. Now it is 72.4. Capacity utilization has improved, but there is still an output gap. I have also mentioned that the growth at 8.9% is just marginally above the pre-pandemic level of, equity, a level of the economy. And your private consumption and fixed investment are, I have given the percentages, just 1.1 or 2% above the pre-pandemic level. So there is still an output gap, but I think it is getting narrowed. If the Deputy Governor Patra wants to add something. So there is still an output gap, but it is getting narrowed. And again, there is a new, new development arising out of the war. So it has to be again reassessed.
Thank you, sir. I'll move on to Mr. Laltendu Mishra from The Hindu.
Thank you, Governor, for taking this question. My question is, again, relating to the geopolitical development that is happening. Since we're still drawing, the government is very vocal about getting oil from Russia. Is there any sanction expected? And in case that happens, how we're going to deal with it? Thank you.
No, sanctions, you mean sanctions against India? No, I'm not the person to reply on that. I mean, that somebody else decides. But on these matters, I think government is seized with the issues. So it's a matter which the government will deal with it. So far as RBI is concerned, obviously we will not do anything which goes against the sanctions. Would you like to add anything, Deputy Governor Ravi Shankar?
So nothing specific. I mean, the war has obviously disrupted trade and payments. So, we are discussing with all stakeholders and remaining sensitive to sanctions. If and when anything is decided, we'll come to know. Thank you.
Thank you, sirs. I'll move on to Mr. Anurag Shah from Z Business News.
नमस्ते सर। सर आपसे यही समझना चाहूँगा, अभी भी हमने देखा है कि डिजिटल लेंडिंग से जुड़ी हुई जो शिकायतें हैं देश भर से काफ़ी ज़्यादा आ रही है अलग अलग हिस्सों में, जो जहाँ लोगों को परेशान किया जा रहा है। तो इसी में जो आरबीआई की एक वर्किंग ग्रुप की ड्राफ्ट रिपोर्ट आई थी नवंबर के अंदर, तो वो कब तक इम्प्लीमेंट हो जाएगी, उसकी क्या टाइमलाइन होगी, अगर आप वो बता पाए। दूसरा सर एक सवाल था, जो आज आपने ऐलान किया है कैशलेस विड्रॉल, कार्डलेस विड्रॉल का, इंटरऑपरेटिबिलिटी का, तो इसके अंदर क्या देश भर के अंदर जो एटीएम है उनको अलग तरीके से चेंज किया जाएगा, और इसका मकसद यही है कि अब नए अकाउंट्स में डेबिट कार्ड वगैरह जारी नहीं होंगे, इसको लेकर उस पहल पे हम आगे बढ़ रहे हैं।
पहला क्वेश्चन आपका था कि ये डिजिटल लेंडिंग में जो इतने सारे फ्रॉड्स हो रहे हैं, कंप्लेंट आ रहे हैं, हमारे पास भी बहुत कंप्लेंट्स आ रहे हैं, उसमें हम तुरंत कार्रवाई करते हैं। जहाँ पे भी कंप्लेंट आता है, डायरेक्टली आए या इनडायरेक्टली आए, या इवन सोशल मीडिया में भी कभी कभी कुछ कंप्लेंट्स आते हैं जो कि हमारे नज़र में आते हैं, तो उसके ऊपर तो हम अलग से इंडिविजुअल केसेस में कार्रवाई करते हैं। और जो कमेटी हमने फॉर्म किया है उसका रिकमेंडेशन पब्लिक कमेंट्स के लिए हमने शायद 31 दिसंबर तक ओपन रखा था। वो कमेंट्स अभी सारे कमेंट्स आ गए हैं और बहुत सारे कमेंट्स आ गए हैं, वो सब अभी एग्जामिन कर रहे हैं, शायद एग्जामिनेशन कंप्लीट हो गया है और उसके ऊपर अभी हम इंटरनली डेलिबरेट करके उसको अगले 1-2 महीने में हम उसको फाइनलाइज करके हमारा क्या फ़ैसला है वो बता देंगे। इज़ देयर एनीथिंग एल्स यू वांट टू ऐड?
सर आपने बता दिया, वैसे ही 650 से ज़्यादा सजेशंस आए थे उस कंप्लेन अगर कमेटी के रिकमेंडेशन पे, सबको ध्यान में रखते हुए हमने एक रिस्पांस फ्रेम किया है, वो डिलिब्रेट करने के बाद हम इशू करेंगे गाइडलाइंस।
और जो कार्डलेस कैश विथड्रॉल, डिप्टी गवर्नर रवि शंकर कैन रिप्लाई।
हाँ, कार्डलेस कैश विड्रॉल इसीलिए इंट्रोड्यूस कर रहे हैं, कार्ड स्कीमिंग वगैरह जो स्कैम हो सकता है, थैंक यू, वो सब ना हो। ऑथेंटिकेशन यूपीआई के थ्रू करने का प्रपोजल है। इससे कोई भी बैंक का एटीएम है या थर्ड पार्टी एटीएम है, वाइट लेबल एटीएम से कहीं से भी कोई भी बैंक विड्रॉ कर सकते हैं। उसमें सिस्टमिक क्या चेंजेस होंगे, उसमें इंस्ट्रक्शंस क्या होगा बैंक को, वो सब हम वर्कआउट कर रहे हैं। वो इशू करने से आपको पता चल जाएगा।
लेकिन सर ये प्रक्रिया थोड़ी लंबी होगी क्योंकि बहुत बड़े पैमाने पे आपको बदलाव करने पड़ेंगे, इसलिए
अभी कुछ बैंक्स वैसे अपना एटीएम में अभी भी कर रहे हैं, तो उतना लंबी नहीं होनी चाहिए प्रक्रिया। तो 2-3 महीने का अंदर इश्यूज क्रिस्टलाइज हो जाना चाहिए।
थैंक यू।
और कार्ड इशू करना बंद कर देंगे वो नौबत नहीं आएगी। कार्ड और क्रेडिट कार्ड, बिकॉज क्रेडिट कार्ड डेबिट कार्ड का बहुत सारे अदर यूटिलिटीज़ है, तो वो तो चालू रहेगा।
नहीं था, लेकिन सर जब ये आपने शुरुआत कर दी तो फिर डेबिट कार्ड का कोई,
देखिए डेबिट कार्ड क्रेडिट कार्ड सिर्फ एटीएम में पैसा कैश विथड्रॉ करने के लिए नहीं है। डेबिट कार्ड क्रेडिट कार्ड की और सारी यूटिलाइजेशन है। आप कुछ दुकान जा रहे हैं, कुछ खरीद रहे हैं, रेस्टोरेंट में कुछ खा रहे हैं, या फॉरेन ट्रैवल कर रहे हैं, वहाँ पे कुछ पेमेंट करेंगे, तो क्रेडिट कार्ड डेबिट कार्ड का यूटिलिटी तो रहेगा, तो उसमें कोई किसी तरह का बदलाव नहीं आएगा, वो कंटिन्यू करेगी।
धन्यवाद आप सभी का। अभी आई विल इनवाइट श्रीतमा बोस फ्रॉम फाइनेंशियल एक्सप्रेस टू आस्क अ क्वेश्चन।
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. My question is about the impact of the Russia-Ukraine situation on exports and imports. There's been a lot of speculation around rupee-ruble trade. How is the RBI viewing the entire piece of alternative mechanisms for trade payments and settlements. That is one. The other is that a couple of policies ago, you had announced that there will be a working paper on transaction charges, payment transaction charges in the system. How is that coming along, and when can we expect to be able to read that? Thank you.
I think Deputy Governor Ravi Shankar can take the question.
On transaction charges, we are working at it. It's nearing completion. We have to cover all kinds of transaction charges, including interchange and other fees that they're working. The proposals we are also discussing with certain stakeholders. We'll come out with that shortly. As far as the earlier question that you have asked on, trade-related payment disturbances because of the Ukraine war, that, as I have clarified, a little while ago, everyone is talking to us, industry groups, banks, everyone is trying to find out how best payments can be facilitated under these changed circumstances. We are discussing here. Government is also involved. We also have to be sensitive to sanctions. We are discussing all these alternatives. Once something comes out, we will, you will get to know about it.
धन्यवाद सर. अब मैं अंकुर मिश्रा ET नाव स्वदेश और ET नाव से प्रश्न पूछने के लिए आग्रह करूंगा.
Thank you, Yogesh sir. Thank you, Governor. So for the banks, especially small finance banks who wants to convert into bank, is there a designated screening committee or the same committee which is there for on-tap licensing looks into it? Have you already received any proposal? And another question was there on the asset reconstruction companies. There was a report of the committee. Are final guidelines expected? By when that can happen?
I think Deputy Governor Rajeshwar Rao can take that question.
Now, as far as the small finance banks are concerned, the same standing external advisory committee which looks at the application for universal long tap licenses, they are looking at the applications received from the SFBs also. And if there is any conversion of an SFB into a universal bank, the same committee would look at it before taking the process forward in accordance with our laid down standard operating procedure. Now, the second question, I just missed that.
Asset reconstruction companies.
ARC, again, the committee recommendations have been examined. We had received a number of public suggestions on that committee recommendation. They have been, examined, and our internal view is being taken. Once we deliberate further on that, we will come out with the guidelines on that issue shortly.
Thank you, sir. I'll move on to Mr. Roysuke Hanada from Nikkei to ask his question.
Thank you, Yogesh. I would like to ask two questions. One of the things is about CBDC. Could you please kindly share with any update of the introduction schedule of the CBDC by the RBI? And another thing is Indo-Russian relationship. Some Indo-Russian transaction platform is said to be developed by the RBI, but some of the people from the West country might criticize that such kind of effort might contribute to the Russian Ukraine invasion. What do you think of these kind of potential criticism about the development of the transaction platform about Russia?
Thank you. I would request Deputy Governor Ravi Shankar to take that questions. The two questions.
On the Indo-Russian trade, there is no platform that I am aware of. There are press reports that I'm reading, but there's nothing that I'm aware of. And as I clarified earlier, anything that we do will be sensitive to the sanctions. I'm sorry, can you just, the first question was on CBDC. You wanted an update. Is that what you wanted? Okay. It is a work in progress. Now that the legislative enablement has been done, we are in a position to start off with our testing and with our pilot projects. As I have been talking earlier, the approach we will take will be calibrated and nuanced. We will probably start off with one pilot and move on from one to the other. The wholesale segment is probably the first one that we'll try out because it's the easiest to implement. The other segments are more technology intensive. So we will go on with that in a manner that is non-disruptive. As has been announced in the budget, all this will be done through the course of the year, and as announced in the budget, it will be introduced.
Thank you, sir. I'll move on to Ms. Shama Mishra from Doordarshan to ask her question.
Thank you, Yogesh sir. Hi, sir. Given the fact that global market is showing that price of any commodity is not going to come down, is RBI worried about the inflation given the situation in some countries? And you already mentioned that we'll be taking actions accordingly, but is the situation worrisome for RBI? Also, a little clarity on the reverse repo rate.
I thought reverse repo we had explained. Is there anything else you would like to, I think you can add that. And with regard to commodity prices, you know, we have to be watchful. And to say that they will not come down, I'm not saying that they are going to come down, but to say that they will not come down, I don't know. If they are to go up, how much they will go up, nobody knows. Oil prices are, crude oil prices are fluctuating every day. Yesterday it was 108, today I think morning it was close to, or yesterday in between it was 102, and before that it was 108, 110, became 102. Today morning I think it was around 100 or so. Probably below. I have not seen the latest one, but morning I had seen it was around 100. So it's very volatile. And very difficult to really say where the prices will move, but we will be watchful, and all our actions will be suitably tailored. We will be nimble-footed, and beyond that, I think repo it has already been explained. So by the Deputy Governor, yeah.
Thank you, sir. I think I'll take the last question from Mr. Jigar Pathak, Newsrise.
Thank you. Sir, just wanted to know, since the inflation forecasts have been revised upwards, have you factored in the government reforms, supply-side reforms in this?
No, government reforms, it's for government to take. Reforms meaning what? Some supply-side measures government had taken last year. This year, what the government will do, I am not aware. Only when some measures are taken, then only they will be factored in.
What are the expectations in terms of...
No, I cannot say because it is government's, it's in government's domain to decide on if they want to take any measures on the supply side. I have said it earlier also, from time to time, we give our suggestions internally to the government on every issue, on not every issue, but on issues which, impact our action. We keep on doing that, but government action, only when government takes certain measures, that will be factored in. We are not anticipating today in our projections, we have not factored in that government will do this or government will not do this. We are taking the situation as it prevails today, domestically and globally, and we have made our assessments for both growth and inflation.
Thank you, sir. Before we end, I think there are a few hands raised. Maybe we'll take one or two questions.
I think just maybe because if everybody starts asking, I can see too many hands going up. So I will start from the left and go. I think I'll take just 2 or 3. Yes.
Okay. Sir, Lata from CNBC TV 18. You have obviously not announced any GSAP this time, although we are starting the borrowing program. But you do say we remain focused on completion of the government borrowing program of the government, and towards this end, it will deploy all instruments. Now, the calculation of some economists is that BOP could be an outflow this time, negative, and so you will have some more space. The calculation is about 2 lakh crore to 3 lakh crore OMOs is still possible, given currency leakage and possible dollar sales. Is that a good guess?
Frankly, I cannot reply because, frankly, I cannot reply. I cannot go on, assessments which are, there are various assessments available on this. We make our internal assessments. Whether there is space or not space, I don't want to give away a headline on that. But it will be on a more serious note. As I said, we have announced one measure, HTM, today. And other measures, as and when required, we will take. Whether there is still space to do more OMO or not do more OMO is again linked to so many other factors like the evolution of how the liquidity situation plays out. And in liquidity, there are many things which are not under our control. The pace of government expenditure, the inflow, outflow, the inflows and the outflows, that is not under our control. The currency in circulation also, that is something which is not under our control. So therefore, it's an evolving and dynamic situation. All options are available with us. We'll deploy them as and when there is a need.
Thank you, Governor. Govardhan from Economic Times. So over the years, you have been tightening the regulation on the NBFCs. That is probably one of the reasons why that HDFC Bank and HDFC merger happened. So that's what the managements have said. So there are other big NBFCs also, which are facing the same situation where they cannot grow and they really don't see kind of a future to grow. Despite the internal working group recommending banking licenses for the industrial houses, you didn't go ahead with that. But there are NBFCs which are being run by the industrial houses. If you don't give them the banking license and at the same time that they have to face the rules which apply to the banks, what is the way out or what is the future for them? So is there going to be any regulatory relook and review at that? Thank you.
You see, our main focus is on promoting and constantly strengthening financial stability. Over the last 3 years or so, we first started by issuing certain regulatory guidelines for the banks with regard to governance in scheduled commercial banks, both, all scheduled commercial banks, governance. We issued certain guidelines about full-time director, CEO, and other full-time director salaries. We have issued several guidelines. Then on NBFC, we have come out with a new regulatory framework. Cooperative banks, there was another urban cooperative banks, there was a committee. The committee recommendations have come. They are under, we have almost completed the internal examination and we should be issuing our framework. So we have done cooperative banks. So we have done banks, we have done NBFCs, we have done cooperative banks, and ARCs. That is another, another category of financial sector players. ARC also we have dealt with. Digital lending. So all these are a part of our regulatory. We want to sort of take necessary regulatory measures to be in sync with the changing times, and given the scale-based regulation for NBFCs which we have now introduced, it is for individual large, and given our current status with regard to the bank licensing policy, it is for large NBFCs to take their own commercial decision about their future, whether they want to continue as it is. We have no problem with that. The system, the regulations provide for that. Or if they want to go for some kind of restructuring, it's for them to decide.
Governor, if there is a proposal from an industrial house-run NBFC to merge with the bank, will the RBI allow it to go through?
No, you know our current licensing policy. So, please.
Ashish Agashi has not asked a question, so we'll give him an opportunity.
Okay, but we need to conclude this,
yes, sir.
Yeah.
So, in your assumption on inflation, do you actually take into consideration the full pass-through of crude prices as is happening right now? And secondly, have you recommended the government for any sort of more excise cuts, given the pressures which you see on inflation?
You see, specifically what is discussed between the government, it's not as if recommendation we send as formal recommendation or anything like that. I mean, RBI is not required to, nor does RBI give recommendations on things on which its recommendations are not asked for. But internally, there are a lot of discussions where we give suggestions. Now, what suggestions we have made, I cannot, what suggestions I have made or we will make, it's a part of all discussions. And what was your first question?
The assumption on complete pass-through of the global crude prices into the retail prices.
We have taken into account the global, the crude oil prices, $100 per barrel, and the pump prices, we have taken the prevailing prices.
So one very small question on growth. On the forecast, the quarterly forecast, we go down to 4.1 and 4% in Q3 and Q4. Of course, there's noise in these numbers because of base effect, etc. But I want a sense of the RBI's perception of consumption and the strength in consumption in particular. Employment situation going by Manrega numbers doesn't look like it's completely repaired. Incomes may not have been completely repaired. And now this inflation burden could, impinge on disposable spends. Is the RBI's assessment that consumption remains a weak spot, particularly once the pent-up demand on goods and services is over?
think I said that, no, in my statement that private consumption still, trails the pre-pandemic level.
Q3, Q4 also we don't see repair sort of coming through. Because that's halfway into the year, we still think that there'll be enough sort of hysteresis.
No, in odd basis, we have said that there's a base effect aspect also which you have mentioned, but I don't know. Would you like to say?
It's repairing slowly. As you said, rural demand is weaker than urban. Maybe urban will get back quicker than rural. But it's in a state of repair, and I think it will come back to becoming the mainstay of aggregate demand. It accounts for nearly 60% of aggregate demand. That's where it'll get to. But the repair is on the way.
But I have also said in my statement, and let me slightly also touch upon that rural demand will get support from, again, a good Rabi crop. And we have assumed normal monsoon. Rural demand will get support from that. Urban demand, now that all the restrictions related to COVID have been removed, contact intensive services, the services sector, urban demand also should revive. Mobility has increased in all respects. So there are enough factors to sort of give upward push to both rural and urban demand in the coming months.
Can you throw some light on the rupee ruble trade mechanism that has been established? Is there a bank which has been already designated from India?
You see, on rupee ruble sorry, please complete. Huh?
And there are some reports that Russian central banks are here to discuss the issue. So what is the exact status on that? I just wanted to ask.
No, reports I would not like to comment. As the Deputy Governor explained, as and when some mechanism is worked out, if and when any mechanism is worked out, you will come to know about it. At the moment, basically the importers and exporters have an issue. They have represented both to the government and the RBI. We are in discussion with the government and the RBI. We are sensitive to the sanctions, and the entire thing is under examination. No decision has been taken. If and when a decision is taken, you will come to know about it.
So thank you. With this, we come.
Please. I think that was a very clever way of asking a question.
Jain sir, we've seen so many banks have problems with their IT networks. We've seen payment systems having failures. We know that you all have been increasing your scrutiny, but are you conducting separate IT assessments? Because many of these banks are now being found that their servers are not segregated. There are lots of issues that are cropping up. Anything you can throw a light on what is playing out in, at the inspection level when the RBI goes for your inspections?
No, you are right that technology is evolving and banks are adopting technology in a big way. So automatically the RBI also has to scale up its supervision, its assessment on the IT and the technology. We are doing it. We are doing specific assessment. We are doing off-site analysis also. And wherever we are finding an outlier entity, then we do the special audit.
So I think we'll come to a close now.
I think there is one thing that we, no, we are saying two fingers, so we have to ask only one question. Yeah, quickly please.
सर एक सवाल हिंदी में पूछना चाहूँगा फॉर 18 स्वदेश। सर आपने बताया कि इन्फ्लेशन प्रायोरिटी है ग्रोथ के ऊपर और ये भी बोला कि आपके सारे ऑप्शंस ओपन हैं, तो हम क्या ये समझें अगर उस सिनेरियो में जहाँ पे महंगाई दर अगर 6% को पार करता है तो क्या पॉलिसी से पहले भी कोई अगर एक्शन लेना होगा तो आरबीआई उसके लिए ओपन है?
देखिए ये हाइपोथेटिकल क्वेश्चन है, मैं दोबारा क्लैरिफाई करता हूँ, मैंने ये नहीं कहा कि ग्रोथ के ऊपर इन्फ्लेशन, मैंने कहा कि जो सीक्वेंस ऑफ प्रायोरिटी है उसमें पहले ग्रोथ था पिछले 3 साल से ग्रोथ और उसके बाद था इन्फ्लेशन। वो जो सीक्वेंसिंग हमने अभी बदल दिया, सीक्वेंसिंग में फर्स्ट इन्फ्लेशन है उसके बाद ग्रोथ है। थैंक यू।
धन्यवाद सर। With this we come to a close to the press conference today. Thank you everyone for attending the press conference in person after 2 years and hope to see you again soon. I thank the top management of Reserve Bank also for sparing time and being with you. Thank you very much.
you